better to do.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of Nothing Better to Do podcast. This is season 1, episode 3. If you're one of the awesome folks that subscribe to our little podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, or any other podcast platform, welcome back. If you are a new listener, welcome aboard to this hardcore version of a fireside chat. I'm Sean, and with me as always is my good pal Rich.
Hello.
Hello.
Today we got Peter Edge of Inclination, Nine Eyes, 20 bands, different bands from Cincinnati as well. And my friend and neighbor and fellow Crucial Edge man. How you doing, Peter?
We're doing pretty well, enjoying the ice storm that is befallen Louisville right now. But other than that, we're good.
Yep.
I don't want to hear it. I'm in Chicago. We've got 17 feet of snow, and it's going to be 0 for the next forever.
And there was a murder-suicide over dibs, if the news is correct.
There was.
That's kind of amazing and horrible at the same time.
Yeah, Peter, your mom is from up here, so are you familiar with dibs?
I'm not familiar with dibs.
All right. So, we have listeners from all over and people that are from places that don't have snow. Snow sucks. Like you might be like, ooh, it's beautiful and I can go skiing and whatever. That's fine. If you are destination going skiing, you're like, okay, snow, fine. Snowmobiling, fine. When you have to drive in it and park in it, your car gets stuck. So
you're in an urban hellscape.
you have to shovel out around your car. So in Chicago, there's a lot of street parking. And once you dig your spot out, you don't want somebody to park in your spot. This isn't the East Coast where a lot of times the snow will melt in a couple of days. We have the snow from the first big snowfall until June. And so you dig that spot out, and if you don't, it freezes and it's ice, and then you can't break it out. So you dig your spot out, and then you mark it with some sort of object that you have in your house or your garage, like orange construction cones, milk crates. I have a picture somewhere of a statue of the Virgin Mary, an old vacuum cleaner where they strung the hose, the extender hose across to a folding chair and then duct taped it. There's all kinds of things you can use, and that marks your spot. Now, if you have the chutzpah to steal somebody's spot, it's on. It's a free for all. And apparently I've learned recently that you can murder somebody, and I think it's legal at that point. It's just like, if it was self-defense or dibs, you're off scot-free.
Oh, dibs, that's the rule.
It's the rule. It's like, it's legal to drive the wrong way on a one-way street as long as you're facing the correct way.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Just like neighborhood rules.
Oh, this is good. This is good.
So we don't want to get into too much of a format, so we sort of go with each guest on how we, start the questions and all that good stuff. But I guess for you, Peter, I was just wondering, how did you happen upon hardcore and what appealed to you about it?
Sure. So I feel like a lot of kids get checked on origins of hardcore because most of us, at least most of my friends, we didn't grow up with older brothers or kids down the street that were really big into any of that. The kids down the street from me in the early 90s were all like thrash metal BMX kids. So I remember being like 7 years old and the two like 12 and 13-year-olds up the street would like make me jump off their skate ramp on my bike and just annihilate myself. They'd laugh at me, but they'd still let me hang around with them. So it was about the best I could get. They'd give me like Anthrax tapes, Metallica tapes. So I was kind of a metal kid forever. And then at about, 15 years old, I started stretching my wings a little bit and kind of found this stretch of road here in Louisville, Bardstown Road, which was kind of notorious for the punk kids. And at the time, I didn't realize kind of the type of kid it was in hindsight, that they were quite a bit more affluent than me in most cases. But there was a arcade there that did like did video games. They did LAN stuff back when that was a thing. And then on the other side of this building was a tiny little stage venue. And I would just kind of go there to hang out with friends, and there would be bands playing. So, I'd see the punk bands and just kind of got into it. It was something to do. Walk, 3 doors up on the same side of the street was Better Days Records. They had a punk section in the back, so you'd go and, I really feel like kids miss out on that, walking into a record store, flipping. They were always cool, like on the artist labels, they would say, if you like this band, check out this other band. And there were a lot of bands I found that way, just taking the pittance of money I earned from my jobs and, going and just buying CDs, sight unseen, never heard before. I mean, like Lifetime, a band that became so big to me. I ended up at a Kid Dynamite show in like '99 without knowing them. They blew me away, understandably. So got really into them and then saw that. You should check out Lifetime. Well, I didn't know anybody in those bands. The internet didn't really provide that kind of stuff for us at that time. Certainly not like it does now. I checked out Lifetime, and that was cool. And you go to shows long enough, you start meeting people. And I was fortunate to find kind of a young group of kids. They were old to me at the time, but they were all, for the most part, under 20. And I realized all of a sudden, like, you could just be a kid that did a band. Like, it didn't have to be this big thing. I think a lot of people miss that. Like, it's not hard to just be in a band and play a show.
Yeah.
I remember like bragging to my mom at probably 16, 15 years old, like showing her the CD I bought off some local band. I was like, I know these guys. Like, these are my people. Like, and in hindsight, it's really funny, but like that energy and that excitement is so cool. And man, I wish most people I knew that were still into hardcore that had been there forever still had a little bit of that, myself very much included.
It's funny with the story you were saying about, I know these guys. I had a similar situation. A friend of my dad, I was telling her, I was like, oh man, I'm like, this band I'm listening to, I'm like, these guys are like 17 years old. And I just remember she was like, they probably have more money than we'll ever see in our lives. I'm like, no, they drive around in a station wagon that smells like eternal farts. And I'm like, I doubt they have money.
No, their entire backline costs about $2,000 between the four of them. Like they're just kids scraping together like everybody else. There's they got signed. The one band got signed. It was the straight edge band that really brought me into the fold, and they got signed to the local label I Stand Alone. And I remember it was such a big thing. And in hindsight, it's like, of course they signed them. Who else were they going to sign? But they had done a lot of. It was a big zine, and they had done all sorts of stuff for them to get signed. Was really neat, and I just remember how exciting all that was. So at that point, I of course had claimed straight edge, because if you were 16, 17, friends with a straight edge band, and you hadn't claimed straight edge, I don't know what you're doing with your life. But yeah, and honestly, it was pretty online with me. I had some pretty big issues with substances really before that, and when I started going to those shows is really when I started pulling that out of my life. I found a different kind of group of kids to be with. And I mean, forever, my mother and I laugh about it to this day, how she was so freaked out about me hanging out with all the punk kids with, the stretched ears and tattoos and all that sort of stuff. But it was all like the clean cut kids from my high school. I went to a Catholic high school here in town. It was all those clean cut kids that were the ones that had the really crappy weed and beer and everything else that I was getting into at 15. It took me to get into the other kids that she was freaked out about to actually chill out a little bit.
Yeah, I think like it's one of those things. I don't know if this was the case for you, but like for me, I think what appealed to me about straight edge was like I wanted to kind of be crazy and do wild shit, but I didn't want to like land in jail or worse, or like have to answer to my parents if I landed in jail, that kind of thing. Yeah.
I would love to say I stopped doing stuff that probably could have landed me in jail, but that took another 4 or 5 years. But.
Well, yeah, we all found different ways to do things that could land us in jail afterwards.
Yeah, I feel like straight edge kids just went to a different chapter of that book.
That's it. I was far less likely to hit someone and kill them with my car. But
unintentionally. You might do it intentionally.
No, I think most 17, 18, 19-year-old kids that tend towards that aggressive lifestyle. And I was an athlete. I was a soccer player through college. There was, I had a temper. I still kind of do. I've mellowed out in my 30s, but I like every other kid had to work through it. I do look back at it and go, man, if I had thrown substance abuse onto that, it would have been a problem, because for me, this isn't everybody, but there was no way. And I figured this out at 16 that I was going to be casually using substances for those years.
Yeah.
Maybe as a grown adult, I could have. I have no interest at this point, but maybe then. But 19, 20 years old, college would have been a nightmare if I had been partying like that. I wouldn't have graduated. It wouldn't have been a thing. So for me, it really put my life into a different pathway, and I've done a lot of things that I don't think I ever would have found without it. Because I think I probably would have gotten in trouble. I mean, you can only be so lucky for so long.
Yeah, I think a lot of straight edge kids kind of don't have mids. I guess like for me, like for example, like I have no impulse control unless it's absolutely not. So I don't drink or do drugs. I don't eat meat or dairy or eggs, but like I'll eat. I can't keep myself from eating, a whole thing of Oreos.
Right. Yeah. I'm fortunate that I figured that out, but and stuck with it. And college for me, so I went to college in Cincinnati, thus all the Cincinnati bands you referenced, but like I found all sorts of other trouble to get into up there. Early 2000s Cincinnati certainly has its lore. And it just kind of drove into me, and being at a Catholic university where kids felt like compelled to binge drink every chance they got, it just wasn't for me. And I was pretty abrasive about it, especially my freshman year of college, like telling my roommate when he was plastered, I'm like, do you want me to get somebody to take care of you? Because I'm not doing it. That didn't win me any friends. Like talking multiple people on the floor about how drinking was stupid. That didn't win me any friends. Stealing like chalk from the FCA or whatever Christian group on campus, and like writing all sorts of like, feed the Christians to the lions and all sorts of stuff like that all around campus with their chalk, and like watching them freak out. I didn't try to win any friends, but I was very convicted. I was ready to hold true to those convictions that I had.
Yeah. Well, and as you and I both can attest, most people we grew up with who were into that stuff didn't, they're drinking now. What do you think it was that, like, for you, like, made you decide, you're still, is it autopilot, or is it just, was it something a little bit more than that, like in terms of not breaking edge?
Well, I mean, on the one side, like, I've never felt the impulse. In college, after I kind of got out of dorms and actually was living with some guys I liked, they would party and we would just hang out. They didn't care if I was drinking. So it was easy. After college, the first couple of years I was back in Kentucky after college were pretty hard. Most of my buddies had sold out, left hardcore, moved away. My best friend in the world who sang for a band here, Castor Meaden, moved to Oakland, like as soon as I got back, or San Francisco, as soon as I got back to Kentucky. So that was kind of gone. Like, your best friend's gone. My bands in Cincinnati were actually traveling and stuff now, so I wasn't doing that with them. And I was teaching. So my life got pretty narrow. So I didn't really have a lot going on, period. And it was a pretty dark time. My wife and I were separate. We were I think engaged at that point. But she was still finishing up school in Cincinnati. So that was not my best time. But I just kept grinding, and I made a pretty active, I was more outgoing than I probably usually am, and really tried to find dudes to be in bands, and was in just so many terrible bands. Funny, humorously, like, some of the music was incredible, and I really wish I actually had legit recordings of them, but just bands that, none of the other kids in the bands went to hardcore shows or really knew kids in hardcore. Like, they were hardcore kids, but they didn't go. They didn't participate. So no one knew them. So you're not getting good shows and all that. And I just I just grinded, honestly, doing that over and over again. And I want to say like 2008, 2009 area, a band I was in started playing with these really, really young bands here. And Tyler, who sings in Inclination, was like 16, 17, singing for this band, Python.
Yes, I remember that band.
Xerxes kids who became, I don't know what you call it, post-hardcore or whatever. Like one of their guitarists was like my camper when I was a camp counselor. He was like 10. His band Xerxes was doing their American Nightmare covers, and like I got to watch them. And there were all these young kids, and at the time they seemed like they were infinitely younger than me. And now most of them are coming up on 30 as well. So I finally made some connections, and we did another kind of pop punk band from there called Late Ones for 3 or 4 years, and I just kind of got back into it. Straight edge was just always a part of that for me. Hardcore for me, like the party hardcore never made sense to me. Like I know a lot of dudes now, and really the last 4 or 5 years that have done it. Like, dude, we go down to FYA, like there's a whole like there were a whole group of kids that are like, we like hardcore, we like to party, this is what we're doing. I'm like, awesome, like go off. It's just nothing, Ohio, like it was very much you're straight edge or you're quiet. While I was there, I'm not saying that's cool. It's just very much what it was. And in Louisville, it was just so small and then so absent. Like I said, when I got back, there was a hardcore scene, but it was all flat bill deathcore, which is not exactly my vibe. So I don't know. I guess I never felt the need to do it to fit in. I never felt like I regularly had friends that were straight edge, and steadily, like you alluded to before, they all aren't now and all weren't. And there was definitely some turmoil there where they were all just like, yeah, he sold out, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to fight the guy, but the fact that none of you even feel like a little bummed out that your buddy sold out tells me what your future is. And I don't mean to sound like a prick with that, but it turns out correct more times than it doesn't. So when I met some of the other guys and that eventually became Nine Eyes, like it was just cool to meet new people and play in new bands, and the rest is history.
Yeah. So I don't drink, but I'm not straight edge. I'm just whatever. But at what point did straight edge become, an identifier or, something that you were just burning passion about to being just a part of who you are, kind of, I guess a yin and yang kind of thing with the rest of your personality and something like that. I mean, at what point did that kind of just become part of who you were rather than the front facing part of who you are?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it just happens, for me at least. Like most kids, I think most kids just kind of jump in because it is cool. And no matter how much anybody wants to say like, no, I really thought it through, and it really seems like the lifestyle choice for me for life and all that. Mm-hmm. It's really, I don't get angry at 16-year-old kids for saying that and selling out 6 months later. Like they're 16. It's okay. I understand how that happens. I work with, that age kids. Like they're figuring so much out. For me, it made sense at the time. And again, when I went off to college, like everyone in Cincinnati hardcore that I had anything to do with was straight edge. Literally all of them. It was predominant. So as far as like trying to find an identifiable culture when you're at a college that doesn't, as far as the social side goes, there weren't a lot of kids that looked like me. I showed up on campus in my brand new Reach the Sky shirt. And, I flew that flag as high as I could that first week, trying to find any hardcore kid I could, with very, very limited success. And, there just wasn't a lot for me there. So to kind of reach out and find that hardcore scene, there was this basement venue about a mile from campus that I could walk to. And I just started walking over there every chance I could and just, hanging around and making some friends and doing all that stuff. So at that point, it becomes kind of a big part of my personality. Some of those guys definitely inspired me to like know that no, you can be 30 and straight edge. Like it's not this thing that we all claim is for life and then we get old and just kind of let it go away. Like that's not that can happen for sure. I kind of revel in that. I kind of like the idea of being like, yeah, I'm an old straight edge dude. When I meet other old straight edge dudes, I'm like, that's awesome. Some of the shows Inclinations played, I've found the other, 20 years plus crew, and we kind of dap each other up and go, yep, I remember when, and tell old horrible stories and all the kind of cringy stuff that are like do. But it's just it doesn't make sense to me. I did a lot of work. Right. I did a lot of reading and a lot of research in college on the war on drugs. And it's amazing how much that shifted me to understand the politics behind a lot of that. And it really shifted my brain away from this idea of people just love drugs and our government's fighting against it. Like most kids in college, I learned a lot. I went to a pretty conservative school that didn't teach me a lot of that stuff. Yet I go off to a Catholic Jesuit university, and they're like, they're liberaling me up every chance they get. Cincinnati hardcore did not do that to me. But, I learning all about that and going, okay, so there's an entire system, in place to put, minorities and such and drug users in jail for punitive reasons with no hope of redemption. They don't really care, and they want to profit for it. So where's my, can I set aside some of that anger at people and understand this entire situation around me? I thought that was big, and me going, cool. So once I can kind of humanize that, for me, it was really easy to go, okay, so it's a human thing. It's a normal thing. Is this something I have any interest in? I just didn't. I get too jazzed up, and I feel like I'm rambling a little bit here, but there's nothing like putting on More Hate Than Fear for a straight edge dude of my era, and listening to that riff come in. It's just, it hits me. There are still so few things that get me that fired up. And I just love that feeling. I love that being a part of me. I love that I can talk to my child, when she's a little bit older, and be like, I'm not just going to tell you, don't use alcohol and drugs, because you're too young. Because for me, that never made sense. And when I started, experimenting with that sort of stuff, I was way, 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 way too young. Obviously, my parents' messages didn't make much sense to me. I want to be able to look her in the eye and be like, this is why I don't. This is why I don't think you should. And kind of be able to live up to that. I think that's important. I talk to students about it fairly regularly. Like, there's a lot of other ways to do this stuff.
Well, and kind of speaking on the political end of it, because you're pretty left leaning, as both Sean and I are as well. Do you think that your politics were informed by the music, or do you think to an extent that after a certain point it appealed to you because of the politics? Or
there were not a lot of political hardcore bands that I got into.
I guess that's true. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I know you know me pretty well, but the Louisville scene, like, there was a very, very, very big political hardcore scene, and they were just kind of at odds with the rest of us. And I don't know how they viewed us or vice versa. And certainly I have some friends that I would have thrown in that group today, and we're good and we're pretty much in the same way. But it took me a while. I didn't have parents that taught me a lot of this stuff. They were pretty conservative growing up. I just want to throw out there, like, my parents have come around, and it's amazing that they're like full in Democrats right now with everything that's been going on. Like, I wish I could say the same for every other person in my life. Look with some intelligence about life right now and go, probably not the way to lean in. But no, there weren't a lot there. A lot of that just came from growing and reading. The only band, and you'll laugh at me, but the only band that really was like moderately political that really had an impact on me when I was younger was Boy Sets Fire, which is kind of laughable knowing that there's kind of some hubbub about how much they necessarily lived up to some of that stuff. And I don't know those guys. I'm not here to ride on them. But like, it does kind of make me laugh. But I mean, they sang about date rape. They sang about, the mistreatment of workers. They sang about all this stuff. And, as a kid that had been into metal and into, kind of some of those like mid 90s new metal bands and stuff, I never heard anything like that before. And, outside of the Dead Kennedys, like, I'd never heard anyone singing about that stuff. So that was really, and I dug their music, and it was really, really impactful to me. Earth Crisis, as a kid that was never vegan, was vegetarian for a really short time, because when I was really trying all that, I didn't eat vegetables. Rich, I know you've been vegan for long enough to remember when you could not find any of that stuff anywhere ever.
Oh yeah. Well, and I didn't eat vegetables either.
Yeah. And you've got me at 16 trying to convince my suburbanite mom, like, I'm vegetarian now, so help me out. And she's like, cool, what does that mean? So I ended up eating, nothing but Boca burgers and peanut butter and jelly for, 3 meals a day for about 6 weeks. And so I was like, dude, I'm so unhealthy and unhappy. Yeah. And so that was kind of the end of my full in tenure. But that's just what it is. Carl.
It's funny about, like, you talk about when, I guess even in the 90s, when you're like traveling around and trying to be vegetarian or vegan, you're just like, you went outside of a city structure and it's like, what are your options? You could get a salad with nothing on it, just lettuce and tomato. And that was really your option. And I remember I used to work at a warehouse, and they moved the warehouse to a town that butts up to Chicago. I mean, literally it touches Chicago. And I'm a 26-year vegetarian. And so we went to get pizza, and they had it was like they had pizza, and then they had like sandwiches and stuff. And I was like, can I just get a grilled cheese? And they were like, they wrote it up on the ticket as a grilled ham and cheese with no ham.
Yeah.
So it's funny now because you can go to like Taco Bell, you can go to Burger King, and you can get like Impossible or Beyond Meat. And it's insane. Just anywhere you go, you can get like a vegan or vegetarian option. And, road tripping in the 90s, good luck.
Well, like for me, road tripping in the 90s, it was like, okay, I'm going to buy potato chips, and that's what I'm going to eat. But I remember one trip me and some friends made from Michigan to Toronto. And one of my friends, who was a little more conscious of his health and vegan, actually bought a gigantic jar of applesauce and was just drinking the applesauce out of the jar while we're driving through Canada.
Which, in fairness, is equally terrible for you.
Yeah, look at the sugar content of that. It is not good. Just because it has apples in there doesn't make it good. It's like eating pie.
Incredibly processed. So hilariously, or you guys might laugh at because I'm sure you know the guy. So at like 17, I went with Adele Collins and Doug, the guy that I had mentioned before that sang for that band Catch Meeting. They dragged me up to Indianapolis for like Kurt Catalyst's 7th graduation or something from Indiana. So we go to his parents' house. I'm almost positive.
Oh wow!
In the north side of Cincinnati, or excuse me, of Indianapolis. You operate the streets in the 140s or something, and we were in his apartment, and like we had tried to pick up food from somewhere, and I didn't eat vegetables. I didn't eat anything, and I'm like going into this guy's apartment, and I'm trying so hard to, number one, eat something that I will enjoy and not piss him off. And literally the only thing I could find at wherever gas station we stopped in was like Lay's potato chips with French onion dip. So I'm like, yeah, right? I'm in the corner of his apartment, like trying to hide it from him because I don't want him to freak out on me because he's been explained to me as, the next best thing to Carl Crisis. Again, time has made that whole story hilarious to me, but I was so nervous about it. He was going to call me out and all this, and they took me to an Indian restaurant, made me eat cauliflower. It was just really hard on me, man. That was a detrimental experience.
He played bass in Earth Crisis for a very brief period. I'm not sure if you knew that.
I didn't.
Yeah, he on I think the first full tour Earth Crisis did, their bassist couldn't make it, so he just joined the band for one tour.
It was funny, like going up to all that. Obviously, Catalyst was kind of big in Europe.
Yeah,
that's or so.
It still is to an extent. Yeah,
sure. I mean, the guy still has merch selling over there, and I mean, go ask any kid under 30 who Birthright was, or it's not
any kid under 40 probably. Yeah. To be quite honest,
well, I'll be the one who's under 40. I own a jersey. I was very excited. it's one of those things like I didn't realize. When you're young, you don't necessarily know what's cool and you don't know what's what. And like I got introduced to all this stuff and I was like, oh, he runs a label. Here's his distro at his apartment. This must be awesome. It was just such an interesting experience to be like so stoked. And a lot of the young kids that he had that played in
Birthright.
What was it right after that?
Risen.
Because I don't think I ever saw Birthright, but I saw Risen. And I knew a bunch of those kids. They were all around my age and hung out with them periodically over the next decade. Funny times though. Like it's like I said, hindsight on a lot of that just kind of makes me laugh.
Yeah, Birthright played Chicago, it seemed like every other week. Did you ever catch them, Sean?
I may have caught them once or thrice.
Yeah, they played a lot. Honestly, it feels like they rarely. I know they did play the Fireside, but I don't think they played Fireside that often. But like, yeah, they were like Chicago suburbs where it seemed like Neil, the bassist, was always up here. Kurt was too. So, but it's weird to think about all like, yeah. That was a weird scene because it was and even at the time there was sort of talk about, no disrespect to Kurt, I'm actually still online friends with him, but like, yeah, he was a dude probably pretty damn close to his 30s at the time, and had an army of 17-year-olds like hanging out with him.
That's a really good way of putting it, for sure.
Yeah. Which, I'm not saying when I was still more actively involved in my early 30s, I definitely hung out with young kids because, well, most people my age just weren't around anymore, or at least not in the capacity that I was. So,
you know what? It's like that's like a hardcore thing is you tell somebody in the hardcore scene, you're like, oh, okay, whatever. And then, but you tell anybody outside the hardcore scene, you're like, yeah, I hang out with people half my age. And then just like, what do you have, a midlife crisis?
Yeah.
What do you buy them beer? Like, where's the catch here? What's going on?
I think the first time I went to Isaac's parents' house, because that's where that's where he still lives to this day with all his stuff he does with Knocked Loose. Like there's no reason for him to leave. But we went over there for the first Nine Eyes practice like 5-6 years ago. I mean, Isaac was 16, I want to say at the time. I was 32, 31. His parents kind of come over and say hello. And I'm like, oh, cool. I'm almost as close to your parents' age as I am to your age. And when I got to talking to his parents, like we had all sorts of stuff to talk about. I was like, okay, this is where I'm at. It was, and his parents are great. They've been so supportive to him. His dad's like a total old metalhead. Like I remember one time Isaac and I were just jamming and like just riffing around. I think we played through like 90% of Raining Blood just off the head. And his dad's like in there like headbanging. It was super sick.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, like, not that I know any of the kids that go to shows here in Louisville on any sort of personal level, but I'm guessing most of them first of all, I'm old enough to be their parent. And in some cases, I would also bet that I'm as old, if not older than some of their parents, which is just a fucking weird thing to think about. Like, yeah.
I like meeting the hardcore kids and I'm like, yeah, I've been straight edge longer than you've been alive. What's up?
Yep.
It's a good.
It's amazing. We're a genre that will throw the word kid around really, really loosely.
Oh, very much so. Yeah. I was a kid until I think I call myself a man now, but I was probably a kid till I was at least 35.
Absolutely. I'm still I'll always be a hardcore kid. I don't know when that goes away.
I want that on my. I'm not gonna want to be buried, but I want that in my memorial somewhere, just to be like, he was a hardcore kid.
Yeah.
Died at 97.
I respect it.
Yeah. Well, you've kind of talked about being a teacher, but like, do you think as a teacher or as a parent that the way you approach your interaction with younger people is informed by the fact that you're still an active participant in hardcore punk and have been for most of your life at this point? Or,
man, that's a great question. I talk about it now. I
Mhm.
didn't talk about it for a good chunk of my teaching career. I had a kid that got like really, really close with my band at one point, and they were a lot younger at the time. I was teaching middle school at the time, and it got a little weird. It was pretty uncomfortable for me.
Mhm.
So I stepped back from it. And now I talk to him pretty openly about it. And the fact that Inclination actually goes places makes it a little easier to talk about.
Mhm.
To tell a kid like, oh yeah, I'm in a band. We're on a local label. We play, the local dive bar, 15 times a year. Like it's not really a lot to talk about. It's certainly nothing to brag about. But with Inclination actually doing some touring and some traveling, it's like, oh yeah, last summer we played a show in LA, and we played a show in Philly, and then we did a little tour around this area. Like they can relate to that a little bit more. So there's a little more to talk about.
Mhm.
As far as the ethics and this kind of the ethos and the stuff that really matters, I like to think that that's present in me. Period.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are days where it's not so good. But when you kind of get into those conversations that are clearly a little beyond the scope of your course, and you just start talking like a person, I think those are kind of my favorite moments. And I know as a kid, those were the moments I loved with teachers, and a lot of kids have told me the same. Getting to talk to them about, different ways of looking at things, as with the subject matter I teach, a lot of stuff with biological sex and gender and all that comes up, and
Mhm.
like trying to model things for them that are a little less what they hear about all the time, with trans rights and all that being such a, discussed issue right now. To explain to them, like, I know you've been told that there's this and this in biology and that's the only way gender works, but like, no, that's not how biological sex works. Let's talk about other ways it works in humans. Let's talk about other ways it works in different animals. And a lot of that, I know that's science. It's not directly tied to punk and hardcore, but I like to think that willingness to be open-minded and
Mhm.
admit, like, I've had kids that have asked me questions about, sexuality or identity and things like that. And there have been times where I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, I'm a straight white male. My life has been really, really, really easy in all this regard. It is not hard to be me in that way.
Yeah.
I can answer it for you, and a lot of it doesn't always make sense to me, but it doesn't really matter. If I love and support a person, I'm going to love and support them, and that's the end of it. And if it's someone I don't know, I can respect them as a person and let it be. And I feel like I got a lot of that from hardcore.
Mhm.
I keep waiting. I will say there is a point, and I've had the conversation numerous times, like, until it gets to Nazis. Like, at that point, I think you go ahead and punch them in the head. Back to bite me. I didn't actually think I was really going to have to worry about people defending Nazis, but it's 2021, and who knows now. Like, I literally talked to my current boss about that a couple months ago. I was like, yeah, we've had our run-ins with those types, and like, I'm not gonna lie, that didn't fly with me, and I am very comfortable with that part of it. So
Yeah.
when I get called to the principal's office for telling kids it's okay to punch Nazis, maybe that'll be the end of my tenure. But what a way to go out!
Like a boss.
Yeah, I think that's one time where I'll go, okay, social media, let's do the work here. Let's explain why I got release.
There was back in, I want to say it was 98 or 99. There was a Revelation Records showcase tour. Were you at that show by any chance, Sean? Better than 1,000.
I didn't go to the one night. I went to the night with that was the softer stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, anyway, so this tour came through town, and after the show, back in the late 90s, there was a place in Chicago called Pick Me Up. It was kind of like a Denny's, but had a lot of vegan options. So after every show, it was mobbed with hardcore kids.
Which, start a caveat, they moved.
Yeah, they moved further up on Clark, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So anyways, what after the show, I'm sitting down with my friend Chad, and he's buddies with Ray Capo, so I'm like starstruck talking with Ray Capo, blah blah blah. on the other side of the restaurant, most of the dudes from In My Eyes and most of the dudes from Better Than 1,000 and Battery are all together eating and talking. And a guy walks in off the street with a swastika neck tattoo. And yeah, there's some looks exchanged. And next thing I know, he's running out the door, and Ken Olden is running after him. They chase him down across Clark, which it's where Wrigley Field is, Peter, just in case you need frame of reference. Gotcha. But anyways, so they're like running across this giant big street in the middle of the night and just beat the shit out of this dude with a swastika neck tattoo. But yeah, it's one of those things where like I don't like violence, but I was okay with that.
Yeah, that's one of like the conversations I had with my dad very recently about, you know, like how would I talk to your dad about not being so adamantly opposed to some of this crap? Like both of my grandfathers are World War II veterans. Yeah. And you know, I'm not all about the military necessarily. You know, they fought for something that was a pretty clear and present danger to the world. And like, how on earth could I look them and they be like, yeah, but it's different now. Like, you know, we're just using Nazi symbolism because we're patriots or something. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
The like, I can't understand how people can put those two things together and claim it's anything but just racism. I kind of wish they would. There's like, no, we're just like massive racists and want to like overthrow everything. I'm like, okay, cool. Well,
which is the truth of it. I mean,
exactly.
At the end of the day, yeah.
Like, I'm glad you finally just owned it for what it is. You know, if you're on the same side of somebody with a 6 million wasn't enough insignia on their sweatshirt, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Were there? Are there right now? Are there conversations about the impeachment happening in your classes, or is it? I mean, obviously, you don't teach that. You don't teach civics or anything like that. But is that happening, or is it sort of?
Absolutely. You know, we've got the couple teachers I know in our building. It's not a giant school that I teach at, but they have certainly talked about it, and they've been. You know, they've really just done a lot of listening. You know, kids are processing this. I think the biggest thing that they're continuing trying to tell kids, the most important thing I've heard is that they keep trying to mention to them and clarify, this is not normal.
No.
You know, like I certainly was by no means a George Bush fan, but the fact that I'm looking back on that with any semblance of like, like it was bad, but it wasn't like this bad.
No,
kind of scares me a little bit because holy cow, I walked away from Obama because I couldn't imagine how poorly he did after his first term. I wanted more and I didn't get it. Holy cow! Like I didn't know what was to come, man. I should have reveled a little more.
Well, it makes you like kind of like neoliberals.
Yeah,
that's kind of what it boils down to. Like it's such a weird time in history.
I've had to like check myself with the whole like being quasi excited about Biden, and I know he's going to do 9 million things during his presidency to make me go, oh no, like you're still not at all how I ride. Like you're not my person. Like we don't really align all that much. But I'm also not nearly as worried about you doing some of the horrifying things that I saw done now. At the same time, the clock is ticking on undoing some of those things, but we'll see.
I mean, and this is in no way me being glib about it or anything, but like bombs are still going to get dropped on innocent children.
Period.
And that, obviously that's just kind of one of the machinations of American imperialism. But like, I guess right now, he's probably running things further to the left than possibly Carter might be the last one that was even close, in my opinion. I mean, and this is early on, so
yeah, I mean that
he could.
He's said some things that I've actually been kind of excited about regarding renewables and and that stuff. He's got it's just such a difficult. I mean, I understand the guy's got a ridiculous task in front of him with a lot of the landscape, but it is what it is. It's I don't see myself being excited about American politics on a national scale.
No,
anytime soon or ever, and that's okay.
Yeah, it sucks, but like I said, it's better than Trump, and that's that's where we're at, I guess.
That's our benchmark.
Yeah. Just kind of to throw out a more lighthearted question that doesn't involve murder or ethos or what's your favorite Louisville hardcore band? I don't think I've ever really even asked you this personally.
Oh my gosh. It's a kind of a. Oh my gosh, I'm between a couple. I will name one just because I have to. I don't want to be that guy. But Castromeden, vegan straight edge band, like did the Gothenburg metal thing better than like everyone, was right on the cusp of exploding, and it just didn't quite work out. Like they did a tour with Under Oath and Bleeding Through right before the two of them blew up. And it just didn't happen for a bunch of reasons. But they were incredible. Again, I was good friends with some of those guys, and lyrically, very, very intelligent, very, very, very much kind of helped me solidify thoughts. There was a band called Obsessed from around here that was just like a party metalcore band before that was a thing. That just they were a blast, and our buddy Steve sang in it, and like they were awesome. And Crestfallen, that was kind of some of those kids too that did like the Poison the Well, Hopes Fall thing better than both of those bands, but just couldn't get out of Louisville to do it bigger. And their singer went on to do like Breathe or Resist and with Steve and Young Widows, and does all sorts of other stuff now. He's in this new band now that's really sick with his wife. I can't think of what they're called, but it doesn't matter. They're like cool kind of, I don't want to call it dream pop because it's kind of dark, but it's kind of that vibe. It's really, really cool.
It's not that band that Ryan Patterson's in, is it?
No, not J Jail. This is something. It's Fool's Ghost, I want to say. It's on like Relapse or some label where it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyways, I would have to give it to Castromeden. Like they were definitely the most important band to me. I played in like the next incarnation of it that became much more of like a tech metal kind of band called the Goddamn Takeover, which is still a hilarious name for a band, which imploded almost as soon as it started. But
that's usually how it happens.
Yeah, I would love to say like By the Grace of God or something like that because they were huge for me, but they didn't have I didn't have that personal touch with them until much later. I kind of got to know some of those guys, but I certainly got to watch them as a youngster and be like, wow, this is. They were a band that stuck me in hardcore. That Kid Dynamite show I referenced forever ago, like it was 99. It was one of the first hardcore shows. I was very much like, I'm going to this show to see these bands. And it was, in hindsight, it's hilarious, but I only knew By the Grace of God. But Buried Alive opened, Anti-Flag, which doesn't do much for me, but they've canceled. So Buried Alive, then Kid Dynamite, then By the Grace of God played, and then Snapcase headlined. Like unreal show.
Yeah. Hey, were you at the first Crazy Fest, just out of curiosity?
No, I didn't show up till probably the third, I want to say. Second.
Oh, okay. The only one I went to is the first one. I was just curious.
No, I saw one. Like I saw Buried Alive at one of the. I think that was the first one I went to. Buried Alive played. By the Grace of God played. The Movie Life played, and I saw them for the first time. Like that band was huge to me as a youngster. It took some time. I like to be pretty open about the fact I was not a kid that was born into hardcore at 12 and knew everything about it instantly.
Oh, no, none of us were.
Oh, they all are today, buddy. I promise you. The internet makes it so accessible. I'm jealous.
It's funny you bring up By the Grace of God. I love that band as a young hardcore gentleman. And Equal Vision is re-releasing some of their stuff on vinyl. And I was like, oh man, I'm so excited. Pre-ordered it. And then they didn't make that many, and they're just still available. And I'm just like, why? Why don't people still listen to By the Grace of God? They're so good.
Yeah, that's a strange thing. Their legacy is, it's sort of weird how some bands are like the most gigantic bands, and then it's just like once they're gone, and By the Grace of God, by the way, is not gone, but
No.
like
Somehow.
but yeah, but like, you know,
I
no
mean,
one under the age of, I don't know that very many people under the age of 35 or 40 are following By the Grace of God.
no. We played with them probably 2 years ago. They played like a See You Later show, I guess, when Rob moved to Virginia, I think. And they played, the last show, and I think, I don't know where anybody else went. Obviously, Tommy's in town, but they played, and it was pretty sparse. It was a lot of the older crowd, 30 somethings, and probably 40 somethings if we're being honest. And another local kid who's a couple, probably 31, 32, that just loved that band. He knew it, but other than that, man, the young kids kind of split. It's sad, they were a band that was so big for me, but I get it. It happens. By the Grace of God, I mean, they played so many last shows, and I was excited to be there every time. They played one in Rob's basement before he moved. Before this, he's moved a couple times, I guess, but he moved out of a basement over in the Highlands somewhere, and literally they did a like phone call invites only show, and somebody called me and was like, "Yo, By the Grace of God's gonna play a last show, 30 minutes. Get here." And I just kind of wandered in, and there's 20 people in a basement. It was awesome. Like that stuff was incredible. And then I just kept seeing them over and over again, which is cool for sure. I don't know. I wish them all well. There was a little unnecessary to speak of drama that happened at that show, but that's just what it is.
Yeah, I don't. This is just me kind of talking now, but like, I don't think I ever remember, and I know that this is probably incorrect and me just looking at things with rose-colored glasses, but I don't know that there was like really a generational sort of like just, I don't know, like a weird sort of generation gap where like 20-year-old kids are like, "Oh, shut the fuck up, old man." Like I don't remember that for any of my time in hardcore punk up until maybe I don't know, probably the past 5 years.
Yeah.
And it's I mean, this is neither here nor there. It's just like, it's sort of weird how like that happened, because I guess from 1991 up until recently, everything basically stayed the same. The popular bands changed, and maybe that 16-year-old kid who started going to shows didn't know about the band that you thought was the best fucking band on earth, but like, yeah, it's sort of a weird thing that's happening right now, where it's like there's a group of young people are like, "This is ours now." I don't know that there's so much saying "get the fuck out," but it's like, "This is ours now," so be polite to us.
I love that though.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I really love that old man get out of the way or deal with it. I got into it with a Louisville random that, played in two bands 10 years apart and thinks he's God's gift to hardcore, which is because his band sucked. But he and I got into it 10 years ago about this stuff, and it was like, hardcore's mine and hardcore's for me. And I was like, dude, you're almost 30 at this point. Mm-hmm. Like, hardcore's for the kids. Like, you can absolutely be there, but if hardcore meant so much to me and did so much for who I am now as a 17-year-old, as a 19-year-old, taught me so much about what to do and what not to do, how to be good friends, how to, it taught me how to be in bands. It taught me how to meet people. I don't know. It just introduced me to so many things that I would never have gotten. At 37 years old now, like, it doesn't have that same stuff to give to me. It's got a lot to give to me. Don't get me wrong. But I feel like it's more my time to try to give back in some way. And a lot of the ways to give back, give space.
Yeah, that's true.
Come to shows, support bands. there's a couple bands that I've seen play here that are super young kids, and they're awful. Like, they're absolutely terrible, and I love them. Like, I love watching young kids get up there. It's their first band, first time playing guitar in a band, first time writing songs, and they get up there and they play their 7-minute set and 4 songs, and you're like, man, these guys are terrible. That's fantastic. Like, I've coached for years. Like, I tell my players, I tell my daughter, the only way to get good at something is to be really bad at it and keep going.
Yeah.
Like, I love to get to see kids in that process. I love to get to see them, like, just being enveloped in that and owning that and being a part of that. That's incredible to me.
Yeah, and it's also a really nice payoff, when like 6 months or a year down the road,
You're like,
they're extremely formidable.
Whoa, you've been playing your instrument for 2 years now. You're way better at it. Like, and that's that job. I get more jazzed up by seeing a young band of kids be awesome than or be bad, frankly, but like be awesome at it, than like old dudes get up there and just turn out another perfect set. I just get more charge out of it, man, and that's So absolutely yell at me, and if I'm my way to give back now is if I can be in a band and play in it, awesome. I want to keep going because I still love it with every fiber of my being. I'm not quite stage diving and moshing like I might like to think I should, but that's probably okay. I'm a pretty large guy. My place is to be there and do and be a part of it in other ways sometimes, and let other kids run their own scenes, let them run pieces. Some of the places we've been, we've seen these really young kids booking shows. We were up in Wilkes-Barre back when shows happened last December 19, and we pulled in like the One Step Closer kids and booked a show for us up there, and like they have their own venue. I think every kid that was involved was under 25. They're all just a bunch of skate kids just hanging out, doing graffiti, and just like taking care of the space, starting 9 million awesome bands. And every one of us walked in and was like, this is incredible. Like, everything you can do. And we were telling those guys, like, anything you can do to keep this going, do it. Like, this is so valuable.
Yeah. The thing I find though is like, and this is again, nothing, it's not meant to sound negative, but like, all that, any scene you've ever been involved with, I'm sure you're aware of this, there's periods in time that's just lightning in a jar, and no matter what, I don't know that there's any way to sustain that after a period of time, which sucks.
I mean, we're here talking about it because we all survived the waves.
Yeah.
You watch and you can talk about it with Straight Edge, but it's as accurate, if not more, to talk about it with just kids in hardcore. It all comes in waves. And I remember when I met Chris Alsop from Cincinnati, who sang in a bunch of bands up there, but this band Subgate Fashion that we played in together, I met him and he was 26. I was 18. I remember in the back of my head when I'm meeting him, like, holy cow, I really hope I've worked this a bunch of times. I really hope I'm done with hardcore by the time I'm 26. Which in hindsight, now he's 45 or something like that. I'm 37. Like, we're both still as involved as we can be. Him for sure.
Well, the shape of things changes, I believe. Like, I don't go to every show. Hell, I go to when there's shows happening, I go to probably 3 or 4 a year.
Hell, I haven't shown a year.
Well, none of us have.
I know,
but yeah, like, I mean, like, yeah, it's just, I think there's a point where you reach, and I had a period in my 30s where I was over it. I was done with it. Like, I was just fucking over it. And then I don't know what happened, but I was like, I miss this shit. And, it's, I don't think it's something that really ever leaves, no matter, in some cases, maybe you want to leave it, but you can't. Like, you're kind of just there.
I think it has a lot to offer. And from the ethos to the energy to the friendships to everything in between. And what I get from hardcore isn't the same as what another kid gets from hardcore, and that's okay. No. And I think that's where it can kind of come in and leave your life. It can be periods where you're really, really jazzed on it. And, I'm every bit as jazzed on hardcore right now as I ever have been. And there were times when I wasn't. I missed entire like sections of hardcore history my friends will make fun of me for. And it's like at that point, it wasn't clicking for me. And it's just what it is. I love that it's this kind of subculture that can exist almost in waves as well. But maybe I like the idea that I came back to it when a lot of my friends didn't, and it's okay that they didn't. It's not a problem. But I can't understand it. There's such an attraction to it for me from playing in bands and meeting people and seeing bands. I don't know. I got the bug.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Sure.
So you're an adult, you have a family, and you have a career, and you have a successful band now. How do you contrast that with the logistics of it and making it work compared to some of your previous bands when you were younger and had less responsibilities? And how do you make that work?
Yeah, luck is the biggest. The fact that when Inclination really started doing stuff, I want to say my daughter was 4 or 5, so that helped a little bit. She wasn't super, super young. Isaac, so the other guitarist in Knocked Loose, Isaac, plays in Inclination, I'm sorry, plays in Knocked Loose. And, when the world is normal, they're touring 8-9 months a year. So a lot of the time it kind of works because he can't do anything. Like there's not a push for Isaac to get out on the road with Inclination because, well, he's out with Knocked. And we're on the same label as Knocked at Pure Noise. So there's, they're not pushing on Inclination to do stuff when they know Knocked is out, and that's the right choice for them. Our bassist is in school. Our drummer, Brian, is played in a band called Razor and played in some other bands periodically. And I mean, he's in a band called Big Laugh now from Milwaukee, I think. And
he's in that band now?
I think so, yeah. He had moved up there to be with them and had to move back, but I don't think that was anything about the band. I think he just figuring life out a little bit.
That band's stupid good.
Super good band. So, he's kind of in and out. So for us, it's kind of been like, all right, well, let's find a couple days during winter break from school for myself and the bassist, Caleb, who's in school. Let's find some time in the summer and make it happen. So we kind of committed to doing little tours here and there, and then we were able to make some of the fest stuff work. Like we flew out and did Sound and Fury in 2019. We drove up and did This Is Hardcore. We've done FYA twice. We've done LDB here, and we've hit a lot of the regional places. 1 time, 2 times. We're not super, super active. But my wife has kind of been able to say, okay, I get that there's some semblance of success to this, and that makes it a little more worthwhile. It's certainly not about money. It's not like Inclination's been writing me checks or anything close to it, nor do I want them to. But the ability to be like, yeah, we went out, we made money. I didn't have to bankroll gas.
Mm-hmm.
We slept in a hotel, 2 of the 3 nights we were out because we could. Things like that as an old man make it a little bit easier. That has helped a lot versus her watching me kind of grind in crappy band after crappy band after crappy band. And frankly, my wife's just been awesome about it. I'm incredibly fortunate. I didn't expect to ever really get in a band that got to do some of the stuff I've now gotten to do. That band I was in with Chris before Soviet Faster did a little bit of touring with me, but since then, man, it's been crappy local show after crappy local show for 12 years. Nine Eyes had a little bit of pickup to them, but we dropped the ball on maybe doing some little touring stuff, and that was that.
Yeah, I think Inclination probably has the dream like scenario for anyone over a certain age, like who still wants to play music.
Yeah,
it's pretty awesome.
I'm just fortunate. And the funny thing was just how it came about. They were literally like Tyler and Isaac were, I think, in front of me like, man, we got to find a straight edge guitarist. Who are we going to get? We need a straight edge guitarist. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'd love to play in it. They're like, well, could you do it? And, we started talking about what it would really look like. And we didn't know, you write a record and you listen to it, because that record was written before I even was asked to be in the band, the first one. And you listen to it and you're like, yo, this is sick. I love this. But come on, how many things have you listened to that you love that go nowhere? Bands that you love that no one else likes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I have the ear to be able to determine this band people are going to like, and this other band people aren't. So when it did pick up, it was great. And, there's a lot of reasons for it. I'm sure a lot of people that, we had a lot of friends and been in bands that people knew and people know, and all that helps. It's true. It's fine. I'm not ashamed of it. Anybody that knows me personally knows how many crappy shows I have grinded on over the years to maybe get a little bit of love. Wasn't the worst thing. So we'll see. I as long as I can keep doing it, I will. It's been, like you said, it's been kind of a dream situation for me.
Is your wife from the hardcore scene, or is she?
Hates it.
Okay, my wife too. It's amazing. It's, at some points you're like, it would have been cool to have somebody that likes the same music as me, but it's also cool to have a wife that's just like, no, you listen to terrible yelly things that make my heart hurt.
Yeah, I like the music. It's just the screaming. It's just the scream. Yeah, for sure. We've all heard that.
It's like, what are they mad about?
Yeah, what are you so? I love that. What are you so angry about? No, she was certainly a rock kid, but we found a lot of bands we liked together. But yeah, she's not a hardcore kid. She came and watched me a couple times here and there when we were first dating. It was very interesting to explain to her parents. Because her dad was super, super supportive of all the my son-in-law or my son-in-law to be's in bands. He's like, I'm coming down to your first show. I'm like, no, I don't really think you want to do that. And he's like, no, of course I'm going to. Trying to explain it to a person that has no frame of reference is really hard.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of those, Inclination, our record release a couple summers back. I had two soccer moms. Legitimately, I coached their sons in travel soccer, just demanded that they were going to come to my show. And I kept trying to play them off. And sure enough, they show up at a skate park to watch us play in front of, maybe 150 kids set up on a skate ramp. I'm like, yeah, this is it. Not really what you thought, is it? And they were super kind about it, of course. It's a little different. When you have a normal set of people or a normal person with you, I feel like I always get a little self-conscious about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I took my wife to a hardcore show once, and it was in Gary, Indiana, in some weird warehouse. And my wife likes musicals, so I simultaneously ruined ever going to a hardcore show again because I got punched by somebody random. Yep. And also I ruined The Music Man for her because she saw what Gary, Indiana was like.
She had never been to Gary?
She's from the East Coast. I mean, there's the East Coast bias where, it's really the globe stops around Pittsburgh and then it picks up again in Reno, Nevada.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My sister-in-law came once and got punched in the head, and that was that. It's I'm sorry.
God.
I don't know what to tell you.
Gary is so rough. I from my understanding, and you might be able to speak to this, Sean, isn't there kind of a scene in Gary now? I
mean, there's a Northwest Indiana scene.
Yeah, which I guess there always has been, but
yeah, I mean, but there's bands that, there's some good bands coming out of there.
Isn't that band Karma from there? Or
I think they just rep Chicago, honestly. But there's definitely some of those. They're definitely homies. There was a band, No Victory. I don't think they're around.
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm thinking of.
I don't think Purgatory is from Northwest Indiana, but I know Brian Pilla plays in Purgatory now, and I'm there's definitely some dudes from NWI that are in that band, and they're pretty sick. So
yeah, that band Penitentiary, they're on the what the heck, that was the label Upstate Records, so they're pretty good. So there's a bunch of bands up there.
It exists for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. It's always funny when a you know, there's always big cities. They're going to have a big scene. But then when, the cool thing about hardcore is there'll be pockets that pop up in these random areas where, you would never expect there to be a scene, and like Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And you're just like, oh, this is a hotbed of hardcore music. And that's awesome. I love it. I mean, Louisville kind of is like that. Louisville has, had some really good bands and a really good scene come out of there. And it's not like a city that you would expect to have, good music coming out of as far as hardcore.
I think part of that has to just simply do with in Richmond, Virginia is another case of this. Like, you can afford to live there, which means you can afford to tour. Like, you can, like you can, work as a barista and maybe save some tips for a little bit and pay rent and go on tour for a month, Whereas if you're in New York City or even Chicago, it's a hell of a lot harder to do that,
I mean, but that's what's so sick about hardcore. Like, you need a handful of kids, some crappy amps, maybe a crappy PA, or we've all plugged into a combo amp as the PA at one time or another, and just made it happen. Like, you get 4 friends there moshing and a couple random kids from the high school, and there's your hardcore show. Like, that stuff's rad.
Yeah.
It doesn't take long.
And that's like a cool thing about hardcore is, you can pick up, just go to another city for a show or even to move there. And it's like, and like you said earlier, is you wave that flag and suddenly you have this camaraderie with people that you never met before. And that's just like a cool thing. You meet somebody on the internet and you're like, oh, hey, we like these same bands. We like the same pressed plastic record. And you're friends and you've got friends all over the world just through this music. It's such a cool genre to, subculture to be in.
Do you feel like that's still there though? Like it used to be?
I mean, my oldest friends are all from the hardcore scene. So I mean, it's hard to have a frame of reference for what the younger kids have, but
I guess I just mean, like, I remember when I was younger, you would go to the mall or walking around, wherever you're walking around, rocking down the road, and you see that kid across the way and they got like the AFI shirt on or something. And you're like, okay, not exactly, but I'm going to give you the nod.
Yeah.
I've got my, Hope Con or whatever it is on, and like, yeah, we're close enough here. Like, there's a little bit of a nod, or you're staring, you're like, I should probably know that kid. I guarantee you I've been in the same room with you. I don't know anymore. There's times I do wonder if like how I feel like hardcore is a little more expansive now. If that still exists at the same level.
Yeah, I want, actually, the way you're put, I think that there's less of that probably. I mean, granted, like, I think that the nature of hardcore kids has always been to be semi-standoffish. Like I remember, like being on a road trip to some show on the Eastern Seaboard and seeing other kids, and it was like we might nod at each other, but it was like very much keeping each other at arm's length. But you would still meet the person from, that would be make friends with at a rest stop in Pennsylvania or wherever. But like, I don't know if that's as common. I don't know that, like, things like band shirts really have that kind of weight that they used to have in the 90s or 80s or early aughts, And I don't know. I mean, that would be a question for the first, 20-year-old we interview, Sean.
Yeah. So far we've only had old people on. No offense, Peter.
Yeah, and being in Louisville too, being a smaller city, maybe that had something to do with it too.
Mm-hmm.
So what's next for Inclination?
Well, we are if the weather hadn't been horrible, I was probably going to be heading out to try to finish the record tonight with Isaac. We are 9 of 10 songs written, demoed. So, the next step is to kind of finish that last demo. They're going to do full demos for vocals here, and then looking to go record sometime this spring. I don't know that we're necessarily pushing to get it out by any particular date, but it will be a full length with Pure Noise. And, we want to release it at the right time. Being a band how we are, just to release records to fill the space. If we can't play, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And Pure Noise certainly isn't pushing us to do that. So for us, it's kind of we want to have it done just because it's been 2 years. It's time. I think, when Fear Turns to Confidence came out in 2019 in March, I think, March or April. So it's time to have something new out. And we've been working on this one for a while. We've got some other little things out that'll be here and there, but we're just kind of waiting for everything to come back above water, but we're ready to go. And then, we'll get back out on the road as we can with Isaac's tour schedule with Knocked, and Brian's stuff with Wrist Meets Razor. Cause they've both, I'm sure they've both got stuff they're waiting to release. So, we're not done. We're excited. We're ready. And I'm very, very, the old, this new record is the greatest thing that we've ever done. Yeah, of course it is. We're really excited about our record. It sounds incredible. So I'm very excited to hear what an actual recording of it'll be like, and, get it out there, and hopefully that'll happen. We completely think that'll happen this year for sure. Hopefully this summer or fall.
What else do you have, Rich?
I don't know. I think I covered everything I can think of right now.
Well, Peter, I really want to thank you for coming on our little show.
Yeah.
Do you want to give yourself some plugs?
No, I have nothing to plug. I appreciate you guys letting me come on here and babble on about my youth. It's good times. I have a suspicion there'll be a lot of like-minded people that are listening, so I hope they can embrace some of that same stuff, or at least find some. Yeah, I remember growing up like that. I really hope this subgenre continues to grow just enough. It's never going to be for everybody, but I love the inclusivity that it offers to kids that want to be a part of it. So the opportunity to really think back about some of those times, and my path to get where I am now has actually been pretty enjoyable. So I appreciate it, guys.
And so I guess that's going to do it for this episode of Nothing Better to Do podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. Please hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify. Give us a review. Makes us go up in the search functions. And we're going to end this with playing an Inclination track for you guys. Check it out. The album is on Pure Noise, and it's still available on vinyl for those of you that collect vinyl. I was unaware of the band. Sorry. When Rich was like, "Oh, we could do this interview," I checked it out. I was like, "This is a banger," and I ordered the record. So, so you guys should check it out too. And we're going to play a track off of it. And thank you guys for listening, and peace out.